You are the only creature on this planet that prays. Not because you're wise, but because somewhere deep in our past, the human brain broke in a very specific way, and it never got fixed. Picture it. Long before the first temple, the first priest, the first written word, a human being kneels down in the dirt, closes their eyes, and speaks out loud to something they cannot see or touch or prove. No one taught them to do it. There were no holy books, no farming, no writing, nothing. And yet, in caves and on open plains scattered across an entire planet, people who could never possibly have met were all doing the exact same impossible thing, talking to the invisible. So here is the question that should genuinely unsettle you. Why? Why would a species clawing its way through a world of predators and starvation waste precious time whispering to the sky? The answer isn't really about religion at all. The answer is hiding inside your own skull. And by the end of this, you're going to realize that the exact machine that built the very first gods is still running, right now behind your eyes. To understand why your brain builds gods, we first have to find the moment it began, and the trail starts somewhere strange, with the dead. Fair warning though, some of the most famous clues we're about to follow turn out to be completely wrong, and I'll show you which ones. In the rest of the animal kingdom, death is met with a shrug. A lion will step over the body of a lion it hunted beside for years and not break stride. A chimpanzee mother might carry her dead infant for a few days, but eventually she sets it down in the dust and walks away. To an animal, a corpse is just meat that stopped working. But at some point, deep in our past, something cracked open in the human mind. Our dead stopped being garbage. They became sacred. And that single shift, treating a lifeless body as if it still mattered, is one of the strangest turns in the entire history of life on Earth. To see how far back it goes, travel to a cave called Qafzeh in what is now Israel. 90,000 years ago, long before anyone had farmed a single grain, someone here was buried on purpose. And they were not buried empty-handed. Beside the bones, archaeologists found lumps of red ochre, deliberately heated in a fire to draw out a deeper, bloodier red. They found seashells, carefully pierced like beads, carried by hand from a coastline nearly 20 miles away. Sit with that. In a world where every single calorie was a fight to the death, someone walked 20 miles for decorations to bury with a corpse. You don't do that for meat that stopped working. You do that for someone you believe is going somewhere. Now push further back. Much, much further. In a pit in northern Spain, at the bottom of a 13-meter shaft, you can only reach by crawling on your hands and knees, lie the bones of at least 28 people. They are roughly 400,000 years old, and lying among them is a single, beautiful hand axe carved from rare red quartzite, a blade so fine that the researchers named it Excalibur. Here's the strange part. It shows no wear at all. It was never used to cut anything. Some archaeologists believe it was placed there on purpose. The oldest funeral offering ever found, a gift for the dead, 400,000 years ago. But here is where we stay honest, because this is where most people telling this story quietly cheat. Others aren't convinced at all. The bones may have simply fallen down the shaft or been dragged there by predators. Nobody can prove it either way. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes it worth thinking about. Then there is the most famous burial of them all. In Shanidar cave in Iraq, a Neanderthal, not even our own species, was laid to rest. And in the soil beneath him, researchers found clumps of ancient pollen. The conclusion was electric. They had buried him on a bed of wildflowers. For decades, that single image rewrote how the world saw Neanderthals. In 2023, scientists took a fresh look at that pollen. And the flowers, it turns out, probably weren't flowers. The pollen was scattered far too randomly, and the most likely culprit was a colony of burrowing bees that had been nesting in that cave floor for thousands of years. So the beautiful flower burial may be a myth, but don't miss the part that survived. The Neanderthal was still deliberately, carefully buried right beside a towering stone. The flowers were bees. The burial was real. Even our cousins, it seems, could not bear to simply leave their dead in the dirt. And the deepest clue of all sits in total darkness. 300 meters inside a cave in France, far, far beyond where any daylight can reach, someone built rings. Hundreds of stalagmites snapped off and stacked into deliberate circles, with the traces of ancient fires still sitting inside them. They are 176,000 years old, which means they weren't built by us. They were built by Neanderthals, carrying fire into the crushing black to make something. And we honestly don't know what. A meeting place, a ritual, a stage for something we will never witness. But whatever it was, it had nothing to do with survival. Nobody needs a stone circle 300 meters underground to eat or sleep or stay warm. This was a mind reaching for meaning in the one place on Earth where there was nothing to find. So we keep slamming into the same wall. Why? Why do brains do this? And this is where the answer stops being about caves and starts being about you. Picture yourself as one of those ancestors, out on the open savanna. The grass beside you rustles. You have a fraction of a second to decide, is that the wind or is it a leopard? Run the math. If you assume it's a leopard and you're wrong, you've wasted a jolt of fear. No harm done. If you assume it's the wind and you're wrong, you are dead. Over millions of years, that lopsided little bet did something permanent to our brains. It tuned us to always, always assume there is someone there. Scientists have a name for it, the hyperactive agency detection device. Your brain is a machine built to see intention everywhere, because the ancestors who sensed a hunter in every shadow lived, and the ones who assumed it was only the wind got eaten. Evolution never built you to be correct. It built you to survive. And a brain wired to find a mind behind the rustling grass will just as easily find a mind behind the thunder. Because that detector does not switch off when the danger passes. When lightning splits the sky, when a drought kills the crops, when a plague takes a child, the very same system fires. Something did this. Something meant this. And then a second piece of your mind kicks in, the part built to guess what other people are thinking, to read what your rival wants. That machinery turns and points itself at the storm. What does the storm want? What did we do to anger it? What can we offer to make it stop? And just like that, without anyone ever deciding to, the rain has a mood, the mountain has a temper, and the whole world fills up with invisible people you can bargain with. That is the birth of the first gods. And before you decide this is something ancient people did, something you have safely outgrown, look at yourself. When a floorboard creaks at 3 in the morning, you freeze, and for half a second, you are absolutely certain someone is there. When something good happens, you feel grateful. Even when there is no one to thank, you knock on wood. You avoid walking under the ladder. You wear the lucky jersey when your team is playing, as if the fabric on your body could somehow reach across a city and change the score. These aren't quirks. They are the exact same rain dance your ancestors performed, running on the exact same hardware. Today, roughly 3 out of 4 people on Earth follow a religion. And even among the people who call themselves atheists, a striking number still quietly feel that there is something out there. We built particle accelerators and sent our machines to the edge of the solar system, and most of our species still cannot shake the sense that the universe is, somehow, watching back. The program that made the gods was never deleted. It is still running, right now, behind your eyes. But here is where the story takes a turn that flipped archaeology on its head. For 100 years, we told ourselves a tidy little tale about how civilization began. First, we said, humans invented farming. Farming gave us surplus food. Surplus food let a few people stop hunting and become priests. And priests eventually built temples. In that story, religion was a luxury, something you could only afford once agriculture had already made you rich. And then, in 1994, on a dusty hilltop in southern Turkey, a single discovery detonated that entire timeline. It's called Göbekli Tepe, massive T-shaped stone pillars, some of them 16 feet tall and as heavy as a truck, carved with snarling lions and scorpions and vultures, arranged in careful rings. It is 11,500 years old. And here is the part that broke everyone's brain. It was built before farming, before writing, before metal, before the wheel, before a single domesticated animal. It was raised by hunter-gatherers, nomads, who somehow gathered in their hundreds to drag 20-ton stones for a purpose that had nothing to do with eating or sleeping. Now, I promised you honesty, so here it is. The most thrilling version of this story says the builders had to invent farming just to feed the crowds their rituals kept summoning. Meaning religion didn't come after civilization, religion created it. That is a breathtaking idea. It is also hotly debated. Newer excavations suggest people may have actually lived at the site as well, which muddies the clean image of a pure, empty temple. So we cannot say for certain that faith built the first farms, but we can say something almost as wild, and this part is solid. The temple came first. Before we planted a single seed, we were already gathering in our hundreds to kneel. But all of that only explains why a single mind might conjure a single god. It doesn't touch the bigger mystery, how gods went on to capture almost the entire species and never let go. Because a hallucination in one person's head doesn't last 10,000 years. For that, belief had to do more than explain the world. It had to solve a problem that was quietly tearing us apart. In a tiny band of 30 people, everyone knows everyone. If you steal, if you cheat, if you shirk the hunt, you are caught and shamed and maybe cast out. But as groups swelled into the hundreds and the thousands, that invisible leash snapped. Suddenly you were surrounded by strangers, and a stranger can lie, take more than his share, and disappear into the crowd. Every large society in history has faced this exact threat of rotting from the inside out. And religion offered a fix so effective it is almost frightening. Give people a God who sees everything, a watcher you cannot hide from, who knows what you did when no one else was looking, who keeps the score even in the dark. Suddenly, behaving yourself wasn't about whether you'd get caught. Someone was always watching. Researchers have actually tested this in the lab. People who believe in a watchful, punishing God will cheat less and share more, even when they are certain no human being can see them. The anthropologist Richard Sosis dug into this and found something remarkable. He studied dozens of 19th century communes, and the religious ones, the ones that demanded costly, painful, time-devouring rituals, because a sacrifice you can't fake is proof that you truly belong. The cost is the entire point. Now, there is a genuine war among scientists about how far this goes. One camp argues these big, moralizing gods are exactly what let humans scale up, from tiny tribes into sprawling civilizations. But in 2019, a major study in the journal Nature argued the complete reverse, that the giant societies came first, and the watching gods only showed up afterward to hold them together. That fight is still raging today. But both sides agree on the thing that matters. Somewhere along the way, the gods became the single most powerful social technology our species has ever built. And underneath all of it lies the oldest wound of all. We are, as far as we know, the only creature that walks around knowing, really knowing, that one day it is going to die. That knowledge is a special kind of horror, and it comes with no off switch. Psychologists even have a name for how we cope with it: terror management. When you remind people of their own death, they don't just shrug it off. They reach instinctively for belief, for an afterlife, for a soul that outlasts the body, for the promise that the end is not really the end. Every human culture ever studied built some version of this: heaven, reincarnation, the ancestors, the spirit world. The details change in every corner of the planet. The function never does. A story strong enough to stand between a human being and the terror of their own ending. So put it all together, and religion stops looking like a single strange idea and starts looking like what it truly is: the place where everything about being human collides at once. A brain that sees minds in the dark. A brain that models what those minds want. A life without a reason, or a death without a door on the other side. A brain that desperately needed strangers to trust one another, and so hung a watcher in the sky to make them. Take minds like ours and drop them into a universe this uncertain, this frightening, this full of thunder we could not explain. And gods were never really a choice. They were an outcome. Our ancestors did not sit down and decide to invent religion. Their brains simply did what brains like ours do. They looked out at a world full of enormous events with no visible cause, and they found someone to answer for them. The thunder was never just the thunder. The storm was never just the storm. For a mind built like ours, there was always going to be something behind it. We conquered the wilderness. We built cities of glass and sent our machines to the edge of the solar system. But the ancient architect who first knelt in the dirt and spoke to the sky is still in there, quiet, hyperactive, and waiting. And the proof is almost embarrassingly simple. Tonight, when the house goes dark and a board creaks somewhere down the hall, notice what your mind reaches for first. It will not think wind. It never does. If this rewired how you see your own mind, even a little, subscribe and stay with us. Because next, we're going down into the temples and the graves and the strange, desperate things our ancestors did to try to cheat death. I'll see you there.